Who's Alex?
Alex is, oh, that's a good question, actually. Alex is somebody who wants to do good, not just for my family, but for myself and my community. For as long as I can remember, my childhood dream was to become a Marine. From a young age, I had a shovel in my hand and pulling a wheelbarrow. My dad was a farmer. I got used to digging trenches and digging holes, and not so much driving tractor, because by the time I got old enough to do that, it was kind of down and dirty. My dad needed more of an opportunity to grow the crop and get a profit out of it, rather than instructing and teaching me how to be what I would consider a man. So I kind of had to figure out some of that stuff on my own. Some people would think that because my dad didn't teach me a lot of stuff, I kind of, like I said, I had to kind of figure it out on my own. And then farming and working with him, I developed a work ethic, but I also developed the ability to take initiative, to figure out how to do things on my own, which very much so, in my opinion, transcribed into the ability to be that squared away Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, to where you don't have the tools to do the job that you were tasked with. And because of my upbringing, I was able to figure out a lot of that stuff, and bring forth to my squad and help us out. So actually, before I was ever able to enlist, on my 17th birthday, I went and talked to the recruiters, and I was about 60 pounds overweight. And so the recruiter was like, "Get out of here, you're not coming into the Marine Corps until you lose weight." Never said a single word for me. And then when he said that, it kind of lit a fire. And the next about 6 months, I made it a goal for myself, and I lost 55 pounds. I was right at the cutoff with my height in order to enlist. Had a different recruiter at that point. I did absolutely everything I could to come in underneath that weight, so I wasn't like riding the scale and sweating on there. And I actually ended up dehydrating myself, and I actually passed out at MEPS because I locked my knees and I was super dehydrated. I dropped in the liaison's office, and I had to go talk to the MEPS commander, some colonel, and she was like, "I don't want to send you to boot camp if you're like this." And I was like, "Ma'am, if you don't send me to boot camp now, like, you know, what else is there to do?" And so she was like, "Are you sure you want to go?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And even though I passed out and I was super dehydrated, they sent me to boot camp. I'm super thankful for that.
Like, you absolutely have to have your rifle zeroed if you want to be effective with it, right? There's definitely some things that are absolutely, you have to absolutely apply the fundamentals.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Your stock is a little bit different in your shoulder.
I was West Coast. It was, I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't know the depth of what I was getting into. You know, growing up on a farm, my father yelled at us, spanked us, whatever, but I wasn't ready for somebody to be in my face, essentially spitting on me. So it was a bit of a culture shock. Any 16-year-old boy stays up late at night, doesn't get very much sleep, but when you wake up, you're not really doing much. In the Marine Corps, you know, you don't get much sleep and you're expected to continue to go at 100%. So it was a bit of an emotional shock for me.
Sure.
Physically, I would say boot camp was very easy for me, just because I had put forth so much effort to be physically ready for it. It was more so just the emotional and mental shock of it. Even though I knew what I was getting into, I didn't fully understand it. Graduate boot camp, I go on my 10 days of boot leave. I show up to Camp Pendleton, California. I showed up, I got a haircut the day before. They didn't like my haircut, so they threw me on a separate bus to go get another one. And because of that, I was late to checking into Bravo Company SOI, so which ended up happening that I actually stuck around Camp Pendleton for 6 weeks before I actually picked up with Delta Company ITB. I got the opportunity to sit in Lima Company, which was like the holding company. Usually just all the broke dicks are there, excuse me, the med holds. Deltas, but.
You gotta put the D's in the A's? Hell yeah. Probably shouldn't put that one.
I was gonna put the daddies and the papas. After SOI, I went to my follow-on school, basic security guard in Chesapeake, Virginia. From there, we graduated, and I was very unfortunate, but fortunate enough to go to Bravo Fast Company, or Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. I say unfortunate because I actually got in trouble for underage drinking. So they took my ability to get a top secret clearance to go PRP and go guard nuclear warheads. But it was fortunate because I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go deploy. I wanted to do the guy shit. So I show up to FAST, and almost every single one of my seniors were all Marja vets. They were all very, very salty, very, very knowledgeable. Some of them at the time, some of them were, you know, just the NCO that just you couldn't make happy no matter what you did. And then a few of them were the NCOs to where they would put your face in the dirt if you deserved it, but after the fact they would teach you and they would help you learn. And I met some of the best officer I ever served with in the military was my platoon commander, Captain Sean Dixon. I learned a concept in the military to where when you're a leader and your subordinates or your men call you dad, you have met the epitome of leadership. You are the one who is able to sternly tell your guys, hey, like you messed up, like this can't happen again. And before they even say that, you knew you messed up and you were disappointed in yourself because you disappointed your dad. It's not the spankings that my father gave me or him yelling at me that ever upset me. It was when he was calm about it because I thoroughly disappointed him. I'm fairly a new father. My son's only 4.5 and I only have one child. So I try. It's a learning process every single day, but I definitely have noticed that when I'm finally calm with him and try to explain it to him, you know, for him to understand why he messed up and why he can't do that. And I see the light bulb in his eyes. It's kind of one of those, this is what my father did, and this is who I saw as true leaders did for me. It definitely helps me strive to become a better father. My 2.5 years with Bravo Fast, I had, and I'll be the first to just divulge this information, I had an opinion on what a Marine should be, and that opinion was wrong. You know, I thought that I should be aggressive at all times. I shouldn't take any shit from anyone, and I should essentially try to be an alpha male. And that got corrected fairly quick, but it took a couple of conversations with my leadership to kind of get that out of my system. And Sean Dixon, you know, my platoon commander, he was aggressive with it and he was stern with it, but at the same time, I think he also knew without actually saying it, and that was something that it took me some time to fully understand. At that moment, I didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he was somebody that he didn't have to say, hey, I care about you and you can come talk to me if you need it. He never said that. It was just, you knew that he was going to be right there no matter what. I'm a very, very fortunate Marine, and I got to hike Mount Suribachi in Iwo Jima. I got to walk the beach. I have a jar of Jameson with the sand. I have a flag at home that's folded up, and I got to fly it on top of the Mount Suribachi. I feel like every man who has pride thinks that they should have been a certain way when it's over with. You know, they're kind of disappointed on how their service was. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't want to leave the Marines. I didn't want to essentially end my title as a Marine, even though I always will be. But I didn't want to leave the grunts. I didn't want to leave doing that man stuff. But I also couldn't bring myself to going back into the Marine Corps because my body was just broken. So I chose security forces in the Air Force because it was a quick turnaround, and I was in a situation where I needed a steady paycheck right then and there. I didn't really do a whole lot the first couple of months. I was a little down and depressed. I was in Minot, North Dakota, very cold, very isolated. I was by myself. My wife and son hadn't moved up yet because we didn't want to move a 6-month-old baby into negative 70-degree weather. So I was by myself for a little bit, and so the first, I would say, half year it was miserable. My wife moved up, and I got the opportunity to try out for the Tactical Response Force in the Air Force, which is where I would put the quote-unquote special. The master sergeant that was in charge of it was 6'3", 270-pound epitome of a Viking, and he walked up to me and he was like, "Hey, you want to come try out?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm sold. You don't even have to tell me what I got to do. I'll do it." He was also, you know, the physical appearance of a leader is also really important to me, which is also why I deem physical fitness a priority. It's not what makes a leader, but what helps give the actual physical shape of a leader. I went and tried out. I got hazed for 24 hours, and then I got on team, and from there, the Air Force has a lot of money, and I was able to go on multiple TDYs. So my time in and the ability to train is what has kind of shaped my reality for me and the seriousness of it. However, I would say the political side of the fact that the Air Force is more of a corporation, and I was the Marine that I should have been in the Air Force. It helped me, but it also kind of was my downfall in certain points, because I was a good Marine in the Air Force, and the Air Force doesn't like that.
Wow,
I made a select few of friends there, like I said, that I would consider more as a brother than my blood brothers, because though we didn't deploy, we went through a lot of sucky situations together. And they were Air Force guys that honestly I would say would have been phenomenal grunts. They would have been phenomenal infantry Marines. So the Leaderless Gentleman is spelled out to be plural. Gentlemen, not gentleman. It's really just me now. Originally it started off as the Boot Band Bros, or the Boot Band Boys, and it was it was a group of Alex, Alan, Adam, and Albert. We were all A's, and it was a group of 4 of us, and we were stuck in a dorm room for about a month and a half because of COVID. And we were able to just really dive deep into what was great about our unit and what was really crappy about our unit. And it seemed to come down to the point that it was just really crappy. And we kind of deemed it that, you know, you point a finger at somebody, you got 3 fingers pointing back at you. But it really comes down to the morale and the job proficiency of a unit really, really comes down to the squad leader or the platoon sergeant. And the leader that we had was not a leader. He was very, very selfish, very, very manipulative, very two-faced. And so we kind of developed the Leaderless Gentlemen as a means to develop a concept for those who don't have a real leader, but you don't have the official capacity to make a change or make a difference. It was more of kind of divulging concepts or ideas or knowledge on, hey, you are a Lance Corporal, you're an A1C, you don't have a billet, you're just general population, but what can you do as an individual to put forth some sort of leadership for people to gravitate towards you? And it started to work because we had A1, you know, E3s, E4s that didn't have any kind of official leadership billet, had those who did have the billet start gravitating towards them and asking them questions, because they started to put forth the effort and they had the persona and the image of being a leader. And then when I got out, it kind of shut down because we just got kind of lazy with it. You know, it was 4 dudes packed into a dorm room, and we were just kind of joking around. In ITB, I had an instructor, the full quote would be, "Get the bitch out your heart and go find Jesus, or I'm gonna take you to the tree line." it was something that it was more of like, oh, I better get my act together so I don't get hazed or go get, smoked or whatever. And I ended up becoming the head cadre for the little selection program that I was talking about. And I kind of just pulled that out of my pocket one day when I was talking to my students. And then from there, it just kind of went off, and it kind of became a team slogan for the whole unit. Just get the bitch out of your heart. A lot of guys kind of pull that towards being, if you're being weak during a physical event, like quit being weak and just go anyway. You're out of breath, your lungs hurt, you're tired. We all are, just go anyway. But it kind of, for me at this point, it's not just a physical aspect, but making the hard decision in a PT run is to stop moaning and stop groaning, get the bitch out of your heart and run anyway. Well, what do we do when we're not in a physical aspect? We are moaning and groaning and complaining about how our life is, about our job situation, and it's like quit whining about it and either do something or leave. And nobody wants to be the quitter. So make the hard choice, which is generally the right one. So at this point, get the bitch out your heart is not keep moving. It's make the right decision, make those hard choices.
Tell me a hard truth that staff officers and people who affect people's lives need to hear.
That's a funny question, because a staff sergeant, a senior NCO, a staff NCO in the Marine Corps, he's retired now, Derek Lindeman. He was also an ITB instructor of mine, and he became a platoon sergeant with me in 3-2. When I was in ITB, he said, as soon as you care more about your rank than your men, you failed as a leader. And that was something I heard, and I would pull it out of my pocket in an NCO meeting and say it or whatever. And I tried to do the best I could at that. But when I got into the Air Force, that year that I spent out between the Marine Corps and the Air Force, I was really able to dig deep into my philosophy and my thought process on leadership. Because when I went into the Air Force, I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to lead men again and do a better job than I did before. And I think that a lot of officers and senior NCOs, as soon as they make a certain rank, they are at a certain time frame in their career. Say a staff sergeant becomes a staff at 13, 15 years, they're like, I only have 5 more years, I only have 7 more years. So they kind of just get on that EAS train, and they just kind of coast. But they're the same guy that looks at the Lance Corporal who's getting out in 6 months and is like, you dropped pack and you're a piece of crap. And it's like, hey bro, you did the same thing and you've got years. There's practice what you preach, but also preach what you practice. And a lot of leaders these days will say, hey, don't care more about your rank than your men. Hey, take care of your guys, do this, do that. But they never truly do it. They're not practicing what they're preaching. They're just preaching. They're standing on a soapbox. And everybody likes to hear themselves talk, and everybody likes to talk about themselves. But getting out of that natural human instinct of being selfish and trying to understand, it's easy for me to sit here in front of the camera and say that I will take care of my men no matter what every single time, but understanding where taking care of my guys and what that can do for me is where I see it. If you mess up, I'm gonna go talk to the first sergeant who's about to NJP you, and I'll close the door and I'll take my rank off and I'll yell at him. At least that's where my stance would be at. And if he's like, you're a piece of crap, get out of here, at least I can go and talk to you as my subordinate and be like, hey, I went and I fought for you. Because what's the first thing a Lance Corporal can tell? That his NCO really actually did fight for him, or that he's just bullshitting him at that moment. The human mind, when you look into somebody's eyes and they're like, hey, I fought for you, you can naturally tell that they're lying to you. And so being able to look at my guy and be like, hey, I went to bat for you, I fought for you, but it's not going in our way right now. That dude can really be able to look at you and be like, I know you fought for me. And if I can look at him like I'm looking at myself in the mirror and say, I fought for you, then that to me is true leadership. There's a lot of people out there that have really, really good concepts on Instagram, on like these leadership pages, And you know, Major Schumann has a fantastic page, Kill Zone, right, where he'll drop leadership stuff, and like Major Schumann with Kill Zone. I'm drawing a blank on his actual name, but Constellus Group. They drop a lot of leadership knowledge and leadership traits on their Instagram, and it's fantastic. It's definitely something I wish I had or wish I paid attention to when I was in the Marine Corps. But I feel as though there are concepts that either help a lance corporal become a better corporal or sergeant, or helps that sergeant, staff NCO, you know, officer start becoming a better leader. But how can a lance corporal be a leader at that point that doesn't have that fire team leader billet or that squad leader billet? You know, hey, take care of your guys, sergeant. And it's like, great. Now, what knowledge traits can I give my PFC who wants to be a leader, that can be a leader, but doesn't have these traits? What can he do at that given moment? And a lot of people will say like, hey, just do your job, become proficient, stay fit,
right,
whatever. And it's like, okay, well, what can I start learning now? What job knowledge can I learn now that I can, you know, go into my buddy's barracks room and we can start discussing this concept of, you know, L-shaped ambushes or a raid or vehicle interdictions, whatever it may be. And what kind of leadership traits can we start using to where I can be essentially a leader as a PFC?
And that because
in FAST, we had all three squads were corporals. All three squad leaders were corporals, and they'd already been on a FAST deployment. Well, 2 fire team leaders in every squad were boots. They just happened to be the tallest midget out of the boot drop that we got, so they dubbed them as a fire team leader. And most of the time, they got fired really fast, and somebody else took their job. I was a fire team leader for 2 months when I first showed up to FAST, and then I got fired because I got in a fight with one of my guys. You know what I mean? Like, how can you get thrown into a leadership billet, but knowing what leadership is like when you're brand new, you know? And if you're not in that official capacity, what can you do essentially to aid your leader? Because if you don't have that billet, the grunts will resonate with this. There's always that corporal that just showed up to the unit who was in FAST, or he was in PRP, he was security forces, and he really doesn't know a lot of the job knowledge that they have. Well, instead of being that lance corporal that should have the billet, well, what can you do to aid that corporal to be better? And that's where the Leaderless Gentlemen was like, because we had that squad leader in the Air Force who he would not be corrected. You couldn't tell him, hey, you can't duck walk on a vehicle interdiction. You can pie the door in CQB, but you don't want to go into the prone, which is all true stories. And it's like, how can you approach that situation? So that's where the Leaderless Gentleman came up, to be, how can you be that bottom of the totem pole but still be a leader? How can you get your friends to gravitate you and see you as a leader?
If you could redo your time within the Marine Corps or the Air Force, what would you do differently?
In the Marine Corps, in ITB, I tore my ACL and my MCL and my meniscus. I was thrown on light duty for 5 days, and more than 5 days, you either went to a different company or you got thrown in Lima Company. And I already spent 3 weeks in Lima Company, and I was like, I am not going back to Lima Company. So I took the 5 days, I went to the physical therapist, I said, hey, like, just get the swelling down on my knee, get me moving a little bit, and I got dropped to a different company, so I went from Delta to Alpha Company, so I spent 5 months in SOI instead of just like 3. And my knee hindered me because I didn't get surgery on it until 3 years later. So my whole time in FAST, I was running and gunning with those guys, and it hindered me, but it didn't stop me. And when I went to AIC, I went to Advanced Infantry Course, I actually hurt my ankle on the same side. Lo and behold, years later, the Air Force was like, hey, you tore like every ligament in your ankle. But at the same time, like, yes, I was hurt, but I allowed it to manifest in my mind to be like, hey, your knee and your ankle is holding you back. Like, take it easy. And I wish in the Marine Corps, I wish I would have been like, no, go until it falls off. Go, go, go. And I mean, I'm broken now. Like, everything hurts every day. But I feel like I would have a little bit more pride in my Marine Corps service if I wouldn't have let it be a thought in my mind. I allowed myself to be hurt, which some people would be like, that's okay, you were hurt. If I would have got the bitch out my heart and allowed myself to just go, not for myself, but for those around me, I think my pride of getting out of the Marine Corps would have been a little bit different.
Thank you.
You struggling?
No. Now I'm retired now, and I instruct on the side with Blake Flannery and his company called Maneuver Training Solutions. And then when Blake has classes with Orion Training Group, I assist with him and travel essentially wherever he's going for that.
Back. Yeah. And like every time, students will catch like pieces of jacket from like 20 yards back. Yeah. It's not a fun range to use.
Are you where you want to be?
Yes. My time out of the Marine Corps, and I'm just going to say it because I think most grunts who get out that didn't do exactly what they wanted but understand, the first few months of being out of the Marine Corps, my Rock Island 1911 was my best friend. It was a rough time. And when I re-enlisted, it was a rough time to get out of that spot, if that makes sense. And I'm not gonna say that if I got out and I didn't have the opportunity to work alongside with men like Blake, that it would be the same way, but it's made my transition out of the military 100% easier because I'm able to continue not just doing what I always wanted to do, and that would be, shoot guns and train in tactics. But in the Air Force, when I became that head cadre, I fell in love with teaching. I fell in love with instructing and teaching other like-minded individuals in a skill set with knowledge that everybody was striving for. The Air Force is just another military branch, and they teach and instruct weapons and tactics to the lowest common denominator for them to understand, but it doesn't allow the individual that already understands it to get better. Essentially, you're wasting this squared away person's time. And so when I became an instructor in the Air Force, I tried to make it a point in the everyday tasks to get that lowest common denominator up to speed, but then pull those ones who are already up to speed to advance. And the light bulb, like I was talking about in my son's eyes when I finally taught calm to him, that light bulb in my students' eyes is what made me fall in love with teaching. And it's a phenomenal opportunity because not only do I get to continue my passion of shooting guns and training in tactics and continue my passion in instructing those skill sets, but I also get to dive deep into a little bit of my other passions like physical fitness and rehabilitation and physical therapy, because that concept 100% coincides with being able to be a quote-unquote operator, whether you're military or civilian. An operator is not an MOS, it's not a MARSOC operator, it's not a Green Beret. An operator is an individual who can perform the fundamentals within a time constraint while either cold, wet, tired, hungry, or injured. And there are plenty of civilians I know, citizens, just ordinary citizens, that can do that better than some of the Green Berets I've met, better than some of the grunts I've met, better than some of the Air Force Security Forces guys I've met. And that light bulb on not just teaching, but being able to teach it and see them fly with it and continue. And the next thing you know, 20 minutes later, they are operating better than you are. And that is what, for me, is a true leader, is I'm not just going to get you up to speed. I'm going to make you and help you become better than I am.
Juicy, but
You want to touch it? The phone.
All right, guys, shooting the doubles from 10. Shooting the doubles from 10. Shooters ready. Stand.
I just want to make a statement that I applied to work with gentlemen like Blake and the owner of OTG because I fell in love with teaching, and it became a passion of mine. Since working with Blake and getting to talk to guys like Jason Ransom with Ransom Tactical, Jared with OTG, I have found that I think the reason why this is my transition out of the military again has become easier is not because I'm continuing to necessarily continue to do my passion, but I have become a part of something bigger than myself again, and it's outstanding to me because everything in my life for 28 years was military. There's nothing bigger than the military. Because I mean, I grew up on a farm. I grew up watching John Wayne movies. I grew up watching movies like Gladiator and Braveheart, and there was nothing more honorable than serving your country and fighting for your country and fighting for the freedoms that you can provide for those that aren't just your subordinates, aren't just your children, but your neighbors. And OTG, Blake, all of these guys have become a part of something bigger in my life than I ever thought. And so I think that is why the transition out of the military again is just 100 times easier because I'm continuing to be part of something bigger than myself.
okay.
It's easier for me to find common ground with individuals in the military. And I would say this can definitely gravitate towards people who've never served before. And we always find that, you know, a few years ago, I was FaceTiming with my wife and I had a cup full of frosted mini wheats, no milk or anything, and I dropped it and I spilled my mini wheats everywhere. And I freaked out. I was so mad that I dropped my mini wheats on the grass, and I was kicking and screaming. I wasn't happy. I'm over exaggerating it, but and then I'm driving down the road, you know, and a vehicle is coming head on with me, and we miss each other by maybe 10 feet, and I'm literally about to die. And I was just like, I calmly swerved to my shoulder of the road, and then I swerved back into the lane, and I was just like, wait a minute. I was like super calm with that. Like, why was I really calm when I'm about to die, but I'm freaking out over my cereal? And I think that a father needs to understand that your child doesn't understand chaos. And the world is chaotic. And it's much more chaotic than 99% of us really realize. I would say the newest generation of Marines that were at the airport in Afghanistan know what true chaos is. But I think even at that, there's still even more length of what chaos can be. And I think that if a father understands that their child doesn't know what chaos is, and that when they're kicking and screaming and they're not listening to you, at that moment it's chaotic for you. So if you're able to understand that that given moment is chaos, it should be easier for you to remain calm. All it is a new situation. And if we are going to, again, really for the grunts and for like-minded individuals, if we are training to be calm when we are essentially going to be baptized by fire, when we are going into the true crucible, if we can coincide our child screaming, even if they're not in pain, and baptism by fire, and we try to relate to it, maybe you'll be able to stay calm when your child doesn't want to listen. Remaining calm for your men to your left and right is one of the most important aspects in a firefight, because then your men to your left and right can trust you when shit hits the fan. If you're freaking out at your child can't trust you when shit hits the fan. So gaining that trust, gaining that institutional and that loving trust with your child is essential. It's not necessarily discipline. I was spanked and yelled at growing up, but I didn't understand true discipline until I was older. And so understanding that you need to gain your child's trust, but your child needs to gain your trust as well.